I've talked about Madoka Magica a lot on my channel, specifically theorizing and discussing details about the witches, but I've never actually discussed the show itself. Well, it's time we fix that. I considered covering the whole show in one big video, but there's just so much to cover that it would be a massively long project, and besides, I think it'd be fun to take a closer look at each episode individually. There's a lot of smart, small details that really intrigue me. This is my favorite anime of all time, and I've rewatched it too many times to count. But every time I rewatch it, I find more and more things in terms of blocking, lighting, directing, animation, etc., etc. Importantly, I'm going into these videos expecting you to know how the story ends. This isn't going to be a review that introduces the plot to you. This is going to be a full dissection of the whole show. So, spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen Madoka, I highly recommend you do. Anyways, let's not beat around the bush. Let's dive into episode 1 of Madoka Magica. The first episode of Madoka Magica is a bit hard to talk about because on a rewatch, it is admittedly kind of boring. Madoka is made by Gen Urobuchi, aka Gen the Butcher, and he didn't get that nickname for nothing. Gen's works tend to have a violent edge to it, so when people heard he was spearheading a magical girl show, they definitely raised their eyebrows and expected something like what he's known for. So the first 2.5 episodes are basically meant to trick you into thinking this will be a typical magical girl story. Lull you into a false sense of security. The downside is that it means a lot from these first few episodes feels vapid, though they definitely understood this was the case, so the first 3 minutes of the show gives us a hint of what's to come. This confusing black and white checkerboard room, akin to something you might see from an M.C. Escher piece, is eerie. It's too quiet, with the only sound being Madoka running, hammering home just how out of place she looks in this strange world. Everything leads to an extraordinarily normal exit sign that leads us right to the real hook of the show. We are in a labyrinth. Valpurgisnacht's labyrinth, to be exact. I think it's interesting that Madoka doesn't run into any familiars as she's going through the labyrinth, even though we know Valpurgisnacht has tons of them, perhaps implying that Homura almost succeeded in beating Valpurgisnacht this time. Fun fact, Kyubey is missing his pupils in this shot.
All this tragedy, all this destruction, you can change it if you want.
A lot of this dialogue is meant to feel empowering and hopeful, very much in line with a regular magical girl show. In hindsight, once we know how bad the incubators are, it really gives Kyubey's words a sinister feeling instead. That's one of the best parts with rewatching the show, paying attention to everything Kyubey says and seeing how much he's lying and manipulating others. Anyways, the way this is set up is meant to make us think this was just a dream, some sort of precognitive moment for Madoka to set up the events we might see in the future. Narratively, yes, that is what the sequence is doing for us, the audience. But in the actual timeline of the show, this was all chronological. When Madoka turns before waking up, this was the moment she became a magical girl. But, as we see with episode 10, she almost immediately became a witch right after. Homura then reset the timeline, and this timeline, Madoka is waking up. The fact that Madoka can remember events from a reset timeline, even though she thinks it's just a dream, helps to hammer home how strong Madoka is. Likely because she's now tied to time itself, and with every reset, she becomes even stronger. From this point on, the episode gets much more boring, like I mentioned, but it's also important to establish the status quo of Madoka's day-to-day life. Her family, her friends, set up the real world she's currently living in, so then when she enters the magical world of being a magical girl, we can better understand how much this changes for her. We get introduced to a lot of weird little things, like their house's layout is so not regular. They have wall-to-wall mirrors and windows in their gigantic powder room. There's a closet under the stairs, and the bed is in the middle of the room. This clock, what the hell? I initially thought Madoka's family was just rich and eclectic. But actually every room is like this. The school's techno fold-out chairs and glass walls. All the buildings in this world look this way. Their layout is almost nonsensical. It's meant to tell us that A, this world is not our own. This could be the future or something, but it's not meant to be an exact one-to-one with our real world. And B, it's a little uneasy feeling, isn't it? You might not even think about the weird design for most of the rooms, but in the back of your mind, you might just register that something feels off.
I don't have secret admirers.
But you should dress and behave like you do. That's a secret every pretty girl should know.
Madoka's mother, Junko, is actually a very important character, but I'll wait to talk about her importance as we see her regularly popping up to give Madoka advice. For now, though, I want to point out how her primary color palette is black and purple, the only character in this original series who shares Homura's colors, perhaps hinting at the fact that Homura isn't actually a bad person. After all, when designing characters, people with similar ideals will often share key colors with each other.
Really? It's not too flashy?
Madoka, honestly, I think the yellow would have been way more flashy. Both colors are pretty flashy colors in general, but the yellow clashes way more with your uniform and your hair color. Fun fact, Junko and Madoka high-five each other here, and I use this shot all the time, specifically when I talk about how much I hate the way high-fives in anime look. Like, their hands just linger in midair, all weird and floaty. It's just a hyper pet peeve of mine. Ready for this to be a normal magical girl show? Don't worry, nothing bad will happen, we promise. Look, our main character is late for school and she's running out with toast in her mouth. A classic, iconic move for every magical girl protagonist. Look, she has fun, color-coordinated friends. They'll likely become magical girls too. Ha 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 ha, shenanigans. Forget everything you saw in that opening sequence. Just look at how happy we are. Yay, wee!
Yeah! Ha! And while I get a chance here, let me clear my throat.
It's Homura. Hey, have you ever noticed that this flashback idea of Madoka remembering Homura from her dream looks awfully dark compared to the actual opening sequence? That's because in the original TV version of this episode, it was much darker. They then brightened things up for the Blu-ray, probably to make things feel slightly less sinister and also help make it easier to see everything that's flying around during the battle. This flashback might just be a leftover from that initial TV version.
I went to a private Catholic school in Tokyo.
That's important. That's an important detail. Religion is an important detail in the show. I'll talk about it when I review the next episode, but remember, it is important. I think it'll be much more fun to cover this sequence in full by comparing it side by side with the original sequence we see in episode 10. So I won't go into too much detail about their exchange here. I'll wait for when we get to that episode. Although I do want to point out how this show often disguises despair as hope and pain as anger. Again, seeing those kind of things is what makes it so fun to rewatch this one.
Or the person you are. Otherwise, you'd lose everything you love.
Similarly, Homura's warnings often feel like threats. It makes the mystery of the show a lot of fun to speculate on. I don't think any magic makes this sound effect again for the rest of the show. It's an interesting choice. Also, it's interesting that she isn't shooting at Kyubey here. Whatever this magical barrage she's doing against Kyubey isn't one of her normal attacks that we see throughout the rest of the show. By this point, Homura knows that shooting Kyubey won't permanently kill him, so maybe she thought magic would be more effective. In all honesty, it was likely just a decision that got made because it's more visually impactful than normal bullets would be. There's been very little magic for the majority of this episode, and the purple blasts is a good way to bring us back to that magical mentality. Also, I know that production on Madoka Magica was rough. The studio flooded at one point in time, and they lost a lot of work and had to start over. That's why there are some shots that look pretty yikes throughout the show. Oh, couldn't even get your arms to look right. Oh, mommy. It was hard for them to deliver the full product. Perhaps Homura's purple blasts was just a leftover from a concept that had to get scrapped during production. Okay, am I the only one who thinks these public headphones are gross? Like, I don't know who's been wearing these things before me.
Madoka, help me!
Is Is that the call of the magical world? Here I go, ready to be a protagonist. An important detail about witches and familiars is that they don't make labyrinths in the middle of regularly populated spaces. They're always found in weird, closed-off, dark areas, back alleyways, areas under construction, abandoned buildings. It's a nice detail to explain why more people aren't accidentally stumbling into labyrinths. Obviously, part of the trick these first few episodes were doing, not only with convincing the audience that this would be a normal magical girl story, is also tricking us into thinking Homura might be a villain. She's cast in shadows, Madoka is scared of her, and yeah, it looks like she's attacking a harmless, cute little magical creature. It's a bit of a common trope nowadays that cute little mascot characters turn out to be the evil ones in stories, especially with magical girl deconstructions like this, but it is an admittedly well done tactic to paint someone as a bad guy. The traditionally scary one is a good guy, and the usually cute looking one is a bad guy. A lot of the fun with Madoka is how much it plays with expectations.
I don't like this place. Everything keeps changing.
I adore the art direction for the witches and their labyrinths. Making them look like they're done in a different art style is a fascinating angle to imply their otherworldly powers. All of that boring normal world stuff we spent all episode establishing pays off here with the introduction of Gertrude's familiars, and it gets legitimately creepy for a second there. Oh my god, this is like nightmare fuel. So, there's an awful lot of runes in Madoka Magica, and most of them end up being references to Goeth's Faust. In fact, the very first shot of the whole show was runes that translate to Prologue in Heaven, which is the translated title for the first scene in Faust. During the introduction of the Anthonys, we see a ton of runes in their labyrinth. Most of them translate to things like no trespassing, fight harmful insects, in reference to Madoka and Sayaka. Those are unknown flowers to me, bend into shape, and other things in that vein. Then they do this longer chant, and this actually ends up being a direct quote from Faust in the,
Hex 9x1.
that part. Basically, what this quote was there was a witch who was demonstrating to Faust a basic magical spell, and this was the magical incantation the witch was saying. This you must ken. From 1 make 10, and 2 let be, make even 3. Then rich you'll be, skip o'er the 4, from 5 and 6, the witch's tricks, make 7 and 8, 'tis finished straight, and 9 is 1, and 10 is none. That is the witch's 1 time 1. Of course, all the runes and the language the Anthonys are speaking are all in German. Looking up the translations for these things and seeing how the runes work in Madoka just shows how much detail there is. There's a lot of, thought put into the designs of the witches. It's so fascinating to me, and I love it.
Party don't start till I walk in.
It's Mommy! Ending the episode off with a much-needed bang lets us know that the fun of this magical adventure is truly starting now, and her awesomely flashy finisher moves. Oh look! An exit sign. Interesting. In fact, quite a lot of this place feels awfully reminiscent of that opening sequence, huh? Well, no, I don't think Madoka was running through this exact location to get to Walpurgisnacht in the opening sequence. I think this is more a visual bookend for us, the audience, to remember how the show started. Also to generate more theories and speculation from the audience about how this all ties together. There was a lot of theories about how the show was going to go when it was first airing, and they can be fun to look back on.
I want you to make contracts with me and become magical girls!
Oh, you slimy little rat, pretending to look happy and shit, you bastard. That's the end of episode 1. A simple yet iconic opening, if I do say so myself. It introduces enough interesting things regularly throughout the episode to keep things entertaining. Whether it's the magical elements of the story, or just presenting the audience with key elements to the mystery of who Homura is, and what's her deal with Madoka and Kyubey. And while the talking scenes with Madoka, Sayaka, and Hitomi can be boring when you've seen the story already, they are important for establishing their characters and personalities, and knowing who they are plays important details into where they're going to move on from here. So while it's not all visually magical adventures and explosions and whatever, it is very important, and it is very well executed. This is the start of a fun new series, and I can't wait to dive into the rest of Madoka Magica, and I hope you'll be joining me along the way.
Hi, I'm Tomoko-chan, and welcome to Cherem Anime. But one thing we all know is that we will always be friends forever, and nothing will ever change that. Everything's changed.
No one's answering? I guess I'll have to call on someone.
Get down!
You. 42?
Wrong!
They got Gina!
Let's go to the mall.
Shout out to my $10 patrons, you're all amazing. Nako, Cool Duck, Andrew, Ramiel, Valhalla Knight, Chamomile, G Extreme, Classy Critic, Noah Perkins, Sunny Shy, Jake, Amber, Hype Man, Zero to Hero, Scaring Crows, Not All That Evil, Messiah Complex, Jacob, Virus, Ben's Sketchbook, The Watcher, Omega Fighter, Trash, Wild Pilot, and The Infinity Effect. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. I hope you had fun with it. I had a lot of fun with it. I love Madoka so much, so diving into each episode in full is going to be such a fun adventure. I can't wait. All of it's going to be so exciting. What do you think of this first episode? Did you see it when it was first initially airing? Did it trick you into thinking this would be a cute, normal, magical girl story? What do you think about any things that I talked about, or things that I maybe didn't talk about that you noticed? Any and all thoughts and opinions about this episode and moving forward with the series, I would love to see it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.